Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for the 12th in a 15-part series as we journey room by room through the Overlook Hotel in Stephen King's The Shining. This video is over chapters 43 through 46, pages 503 through 556. So, what happened in these chapters? Chapter 43, titled Drinks on the House. Jack gets loaded on Martians from Lloyd. In a party where all times are converging, he learns that the Overlook Hotel wants Danny. And him, hey, him too. That's cool. But Danny. And Wendy, Wendy can come. Wendy can come too. That's fine. It's a family. It's a family. But Danny. Jack's got responsibilities, Jack's the big deal here. It's Jack. It's the Jack show, right? Jack, but Danny. Chapter 44, Conversations at the Party. Jack is dancing with a beautiful woman ghost and feeling her up and half paying attention to the furry. Decadence seems to be the letter of the day, and Jack is informed that Halloran has been summoned by Danny. They, Danny and Halloran, maybe Wendy too, intend on ruining this for Jack and his responsibilities. So, Danny must be handled firmly. Attempting to crawl over the bar and make his own drinks, Jack dive bombs and ends up passing out. Chapter 45, titled Stapleton Airport, Denver. Halloran's flight hits major turbulence, but lands safely. It turns out the weird lady from the flight that he had been talking with briefly probably had the shine, and maybe that's why she wanted to have drinks with him. He rents a car and runs into all sorts of trouble on the roads. Again, Halloran running into police officers on the road. Chapter 46, although I wrote it down as 26 for some reason, I don't know why I would have done that, is titled Wendy. Wendy ventures out of the room to make herself and Danny breakfast. On the way back, she finds Jack passed out, and she wakes him up. Jack immediately becomes violent. And this is a real sort of turn for Jack, because while and whereas he was prone to violence and anger before this point, he doesn't even try to talk himself out of it this time. He doesn't wipe the slate clean, as it were. As he is violent with Wendy, Danny comes out of nowhere and jumps on Jack, who throws him down. Wendy manages to grab a wine bottle and crack Jack over the head. Knocks him out. Wendy and Danny then drag Jack to the pantry and lock him in. So, what are we talking about with this episode? One of the funny things about novels, especially when they get to this size, is that they really are a breathing organism of their own. And you can feel that as a reader, and it's probably easier to feel that as a reader than it would be as the writer, because it's so difficult to give that cognitive distance from your own work. So it's the whole, I know what I mean, you don't know what I mean, you don't know that I don't know what you mean type of deal. I don't know what you don't know type of deal. And you can feel different phases in this novel sort of come up. And one of the things that has come up in this selection of chapters, and maybe it was there before in all fairness and I just didn't notice it, is Stephen King making jokes in winks and nods to the reader if that reader is on the level. For example, on page 512, if I can get there, This is, I don't remember where this is. This is in Conversations at the Party. And Jack is thinking to himself and says to himself, the arguments against insanity fall through with a soft, shirring sound, layer on layer. And he doesn't know where that phrase came from. Who was that? The narration says, who was that? Some poet he had read as an undergraduate. Some undergraduate poet who was now selling washers in Wausau or insurance in Indianapolis. Perhaps an original thought. Didn't matter. That's English major humor. That is English major humor. As an English major, you're talking about these highfalutin ideas, and you're looking across the classroom, and you know that within 3 years, very few of you will be talking these highfalutin ideas. Not a lot of jobs in English outside of the teaching realm. And that is an English major joke. If you were in the know, you're in the know. But yes, that is an English major joke. And further, on page 528, little cloistered together, little jokes like this. This is I believe this is Halloran in the airport, or still on the plane. A man 3 rows in front of Halloran had whoopsed into his National Observer, thrown up, and he had grinned apologetically at the stewardess, who came to help him clean it up. That's all right, she comforted him. That's how I feel about Reader's Digest. That's a writer's joke. So within 16 pages here, we have both an English major joke and a writer joke between our author and the reader here, if the reader's on the level. If not, these are just things that these people are thinking to themselves. But Stephen King is obviously a writer, and I believe, he taught English in high school, so obviously he studied English in colleges, or in college as well. But while we're talking about slipping into one's subconscious, something funny happens on the way from the bar. Jack is drunk on imaginary booze at this point. And we get this scene. He stumbled back across the cold, shadowy lobby through the dining room. His foot hooked around a table leg, and he fell full length, upsetting the table with a clatter. He struck his nose hard on the floor, and it began to bleed. He got up, shuffling back blood, and wiping his nose with the back of his hand. It's a little weird. Perhaps it's coincidental, but it's a little weird that here's Jack being drunk, which was a problem with which Stephen King had struggled with alcoholism. This pops up, if you ever read On Writing, this pops up in there. This pops up oftentimes when he's talking about his 70s and 80s. I think he had stopped by the 90s. I don't remember exactly when he stopped, or at least cut back to where it wasn't a problem or an addiction for him. But every time he talks about that alcohol being a problem, he talks about another problem too. Problem with the cocaine. Cocaine. Stephen King would go the rounds with alcohol and cocaine, slapping away at his typewriter. What does cocaine do to you? It gives you nosebleeds. Dries out your nose. So it is weird here to see him inciting one of his demons consciously. Jack is also an alcoholic. Inciting his muse consciously. Jack is also a writer. And because those two things are going slap happy together and getting along oh so well, maybe we have to throw in a symptom of another problem. We don't have the coke. Got a lot of snow. Lots of snow around, but no cocaine. Still, Jack, in the throes of his alcoholic fit, ends up with a bloody nose. Ends up shoving that back up in his nose because he's got problems. Because he's fallen off the wagon. So here we are with the alcohol full bore, and maybe symptoms of cocaine use as well. It is strange how those things manifest. One other small manifestation that is certainly worth mentioning and talking about happens on page 552. This is, after all, in the heat of whether or not Halloran is going to be coming to rescue Danny and Wendy. And we have this paragraph that happens. Panting harshly, she paused a moment, holding Jack's feet against her hips. The surroundings reminded her of the old seafaring captain's cry in Treasure Island after the old blind Pew had passed him the black spot. We'll do 'em yet. Has anyone read it? Do you remember the other time that we saw Halloran? The last time we were introduced to Halloran outside of this novel? Where was he? Just something worth mentioning. But I think that the main conversation pieces for this video will come by way of 517 and 549 through 550. 517, we get this quote. As Jack is at the party, it is in the chapter titled Conversations at the Party. He's talking with some of the people, and one of them says, "You're the caretaker, sir," Grady said mildly. This is coming from Grady. "You've always been the caretaker." "I should know, sir. I've always been here. The same manager hired us both at the same time. Isn't that right, sir?" This all times converging idea. And 549 through 550, this is in Wendy's chapter, as she is trying to convince Danny that they're doing the right thing by locking Daddy in the pantry. Might take a little bit of cajoling if you are a parent, locking another parent away. A lot of things that Danny has been exposed to in the past few months that they have been stationed at the Overlook Hotel. We get this as she is talking to him. "The Overlook has gotten into your daddy. Do you understand me?" Some kind of knowledge came slowly back into Danny's eyes. "The bad stuff," he whispered. "There was none of it here before, was there?" "No. The hotel put it in here. She broke off in a fit of coughing and spat out more blood. Her throat already felt puffed to twice its size. "The hotel made him drink it. Did you hear those people he was talking to this morning?" "Yes. The hotel people." "I heard them too. And that means the hotel is getting stronger. It wants to hurt all of us. But I hope, that it can only do that through your daddy. He was the only one it could catch. Are you understanding me, Danny? It's desperately important that you understand. The hotel caught Daddy." He looked at Jack and groaned helplessly. Those two little passages bring up a lot of questions that are worth discussing because we're reading the book after all. These are not maybe important discussions, but something. Anytime you're talking about a genre type of fiction, which I do not use that term begrudgingly, it is something worth pursuing to understand how the world is set up in the way that it is set up. Here we have the Overlook Hotel as the haunted place. But is it? Because we seem to understand from it that Derry, Maine is a haunted place, but not a haunted building. There are, however, within Derry, Maine, especially haunted places. So what is it here that is haunted? Is it the Overlook Hotel? Or is the Overlook Hotel on top of some sort of spiritual vortex, such as Derry, Maine is? Such as that which Derry, Maine is? Or are these ghosts married to this place of the Overlook Hotel? Are there greater things at play? Are there ghosts within the hotel that predate it? Is there some energy that was there that forced the Overlook Hotel to be constructed on the place where it is? We also, in this section, get the understanding that it was the hotel manager, whoever in the hell that is, that put together that little scrapbook for Jack to find. It was, in essence, I think we are led to believe by this point, the hotel itself. So is the hotel itself the manager, or is something greater than the hotel itself known as the manager by the spirits that walk the halls of the Overlook Hotel? Is it that spiritual vortex type of idea that is going on? And Grady and the woman in 217 just sort of intuit this greater power of the hotel manager, as they are enveloped in something that is timeless and always. Not necessary ideas to the novel itself, but when reading literary fiction or genre fiction, these are the types of things that upon which your mind can wander, right? Oftentimes, I think this is something to which zombie fiction is much more attuned than are perhaps ghost stories. But I think that is something interesting, worth considering. What is it that separates the Overlook Hotel from Derry, Maine? What is it that makes them the same? What is the difference between Pennywise and the woman in room 217? After all, it is... Stephen King does write within a single universe, does he not? Aren't all of Stephen King's books semi-connected in some way? I thought I had heard or read that somewhere, with perhaps the exception of the Gunslinger series. So yeah, I think that's just something worth asking, I think. Especially when you consider the confines of the novel and its assumption of Jack. So, Jack being alive now will have, if he died in that pantry, always existed at the Overlook and would always be the caretaker. What is it that the hotel needs with Danny? Obviously, his power with the shine, whatever that is, obviously that is what is in question, but what might the Overlook Hotel do with that? Is that something that the Overlook Hotel could use as a beacon to attract other travelers into its web? I don't know. But we are getting into the nitty-gritty of this novel. This was over pages 503 through 556, and I believe it's 650. 659 pages in the novel in its entirety. So we've got 2 videos left in the read-along series, and then a review, which means 100-ish pages. I've got to say, I do not recall this novel having so little of the haunting type action going on in my memory. I do not remember being 5/6 of the way through and only really having had a few occurrences. I don't remember that. It is interesting, as Stephen King is touted as the king of horror, especially when you hold him up to Shirley Jackson, who he reveres quite a lot. I don't know that he holds... So Richard Matheson and Shirley Jackson are the two that I really got a sense of reverence for when reading both Danse Macabre and On Writing. Still, I don't think he holds, to my experience, to my interpretation of Danse Macabre and On Writing, I don't know that he held any writer in as high a reverence as he held both television and movies as an influence on his writing and on him entering the horror genre, etc. Which is interesting because, especially in today's horror scene, you seem to have a lot more... The gore starts earlier than 5/6 of the way through the movies. The explicit apparitions of ghosts would start earlier than 5/6 of the way through a movie. All of these things. So where is this restraint coming from? Perhaps from the Shirley Jackson experience. As Shirley Jackson... Even Shirley Jackson's horror sort of feels a lot like speculative fiction. We're going to tweak one little element of reality, and we're just going to see how out of whack this thing can get. That's really how Shirley Jackson wrote. And Stephen King turns the dials up a little bit more than that. Especially if you're looking at something like The Haunting of Hill House. But that's all I've really got for this discussion over these chapters of The Shining. I hope to have you back next week for episode 13, chapters 47 through 51, pages 556 through 600.